Oh. Sarvadharmasthapakatvam sarvadharmaswarupakaha acharyanam mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya te namaha. O establisher of all the faiths, embodiment of all the religions, the greatest teacher among all the teachers, O Sri Ramakrishna, my salutations to you. Sri Ramakrishna talking to the preacher of the Brahmos Samaj and explaining to him that don't think that only your way of worshipping the formless is right. There are other ways also. You can also worship God with form, and both are true, Sri Ramakrishna says. And then he gave that example of supposing you get onto the lake of the nectar of immortality. And you jump into that lake of the nectar of immortality, you become immortal. And supposing someone pushes you, even then you become immortal. So whichever path, whether you are jumping in the lake on your own or somebody is pushing you, you are going to get wet. Whether you are worshipping a formless aspect of the God or you are worshipping God with form, in the form of images, in the form of deities, the end result is going to be the same. Both the devotees, devotee of the formless as well as devotee of the God with form, they are definitely going to attain immortality, Sri Ramakrishna says. And then Sri Ramakrishna gives a typical example from his, the bundle of examples that he keeps quoting. Sri Ramakrishna says, talking to this preacher of the Brahmo Samaj and other Brahmo devotees also, Sri Ramakrishna says, I give the Brahmos the illustration of water and ice. You people, I need to give you illustrations, examples, the parables, the stories quite often. Now, Sri Ramakrishna is a regular visitor to the Brahmo Samaj as such. A lot of Brahmo devotees keep visiting Sri Ramakrishna and seeking his advice, grabbing his teachings. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I always give you Brahmos this example of water and ice. Satchidananda is like an endless expanse of water. It is a huge expanse. There is you cannot find its end. It is endless, limitless expanse of water. The water of that great ocean in cold region freezes into blocks of ice. Now, when you are seeing water everywhere, water is a liquid in shape. But Sri Ramakrishna says, because of the effect of the freezing, in some places you see that water has become ice. It has become solidified. It has taken a form. Otherwise, water is formless for that matter. And Sri Ramakrishna says, the water of the great ocean in cold regions freezes into blocks of ice. Similarly, through the cooling influence of the divine love, through the cooling influence of the bhakti of the bhakta, through the cooling influence of the devotion of the devotees, Satchidananda assumes forms for the sake of the bhaktas. For the sake of bhaktas, Satchidananda assumes the form of their choice. Satchidananda takes the form of Rama, Satchidananda takes the form of Krishna, Satchidananda takes the form of Durga, Satchidananda takes the form of Kali, and whole lot of crores and crores of the deities that we have in our Hindu tradition. So it is the cooling influence of the devotion of the devotee that Satchidananda takes up this form for the sake of the devotees, so that their devotional, they find some kind of objective for their devotional practices. Satchidananda assumes the form for the sake of bhaktas. The rishis had the vision of supersensuous spirit form, the rishis of the yore. They could cross over this body consciousness and going beyond the realm of the five senses. They could attain that state of realizing the formless aspect. They could have the vision of the supersensuous spirit form and talked with that spirit form, talked with that ultimate entity which didn't have any physical form but only the spirit form. Why? Because those rishis, they had crossed over the limited scope of the five senses, the limited arena of the five senses. Once we go beyond the five senses, once we go to the supersensuous level, going beyond these five indriyas and the five senses, then we reach the stage where we talk to the spirit form and not the physical form of the deity. And with the help, but devotees, they acquire a love body. Unlike the rishis of the yore, unlike the rishis of the past, who could easily cross over the limited scope of body consciousness, they could go beyond body consciousness just like that with their severe austerities. Devotees, they can't get into that state because they have to depend on their senses. And then they cultivate this love body, the love for God, the devotion for God, the yearning for God. This yearning, this love, this devotion, with the help of this devotion, they see the spirit form of the Absolute. They see the form, the spirit form of the Absolute. They see through this love body that is created for them by the Lord. The Lord is Satchidananda. The Lord is formless. The Lord is attributeless. But for the sake of the devotee, since the devotee has ignited that love for the form, since the devotee has developed, has created a spark of love for the form of the deity, the Satchidananda formless God assumes the form and appears before the devotee in that spirit form. So Sri Ramakrishna says both have their own ways of attaining the realization. The rishis, they attain realization without depending on these five senses. The devotees, they have to depend on five senses. They have to see the form, they have to talk to him, they have to touch the deity, they have to touch the feet of the Lord. So they use their senses in reaching the same state of immortality what the worshippers of formless aspect of the God they reach. It is also said in the Vedas, Sri Ramakrishna is telling now, it is also said in the Vedas that Brahman is beyond mind and words. Now till the devotee level, Brahman gets limited into the form where you can worship the form with your mind and words. You can chant the name, you can sing the glories. But Sri Ramakrishna says it is also written in the Vedas that Brahman is beyond words and the mind. Till certain level, even the bhaktas at a later stage of their devotion, they cross over. Their feeling of devotion becomes so intense that the bhakta becomes one with the Bhagavan. That distinction between a devotee and the deity, that distinction between the servant and the master, that distinction between the child and the parent, that distinction between the friend and the friend, it ceases at the ultimate point of devotion also. The heat of the sun of knowledge melts the ice-like form of the personal God. Even in case of devotees, those who are worshipping personal God, those who are worshipping the clay images, once that knowledge dawns, once they get that ultimate knowledge, this ice melts. The ice of the form of the God, the form which Satchidananda has assumed for the sake of devotees, that form vanishes. That ice melts when the knowledge of the devotee becomes one with the knowledge of the deity. On attaining knowledge of Brahman and communing with it in nirvikalpa samadhi, one realizes Brahman, the infinite, without form of shape and beyond mind and words. That is the pinnacle of any worship. That is the end product point of any worship. That the devotee and the deity become one. That the worshipper and the worshipped become one. Whether that worshipped is a formless entity or with form. The worshipper and the worshipped, they become one. And then they are beyond the realm of mind and words. The nature of Brahman cannot be described. About it, one remains silent. Having attained Brahmajnana, one cannot speak, like Trailanga Swami. He is into that state of silence, the Mauna Vrata. Then there is nothing to talk. You are into your own divine realm. Then you are one with the Brahman. Who can explain the infinite in words? Can you limit the infinite? You can't. Can you give any kind of limitations to the infinite? You cannot. You cannot describe the infinite in words. It is just a vast expanse. And then Sri Ramakrishna gives a very beautiful example. However high a bird may soar, there are regions higher still. Such a beautiful sentence that Sri Ramakrishna has taught us. A bird may go a kilometer up above in the sky. Still there are higher regions. To what extent can bird go up? To whichever extent bird goes up, the higher space is always there. There is no limit to the up and up and up. You cannot limit that space. There is always something much higher, much higher, much higher. When we are traveling in aeroplanes, we are wonderstruck to look at all the ground below at times, so many feet below. But when we are flying at that high altitude of say 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 feet, there is still higher space above us. There is no end to it. So the astronauts, they go to moon, the astronauts, the rockets, they go to Mars and Jupiter, and still there are still higher spaces. There is no end to it. Sri Ramakrishna says you cannot limit the space. Howsoever high the bird may soar, there are still higher regions above. There is no end to it. And then the preacher with whom Sri Ramakrishna is talking, he also concurs again. He said, yes, sir, it is so stated in the Vedanta philosophy. Now, Sri Ramakrishna, for that matter, he has not studied any books. He has not read any Upanishads. He had not read any Vedas. Literally, no reading. But having attained the Brahman, he has got all the knowledge at his fingertips. And therefore, the preacher says, yes, sir, it is so stated in the Vedanta philosophy. And then Sri Ramakrishna says that once, his typical example of the salt doll, once you attain Brahman, what happens? You cannot describe it. Brahman is beyond any description. Once a salt doll went to the ocean to measure its depth, but it could not come back to give a report. The salt doll went to ocean, and what happened? The salt merged in the salt water. The doll could not come back. Once it, with the intention of, okay, let me see what is the depth of the ocean. The salt doll goes and enters the ocean. I want to find out what is the depth of the ocean. The moment salt doll has gone to the ocean, what has become of the salt doll? Can it come back and tell us, oh, the ocean is so deep? It cannot. So this is what happens with the devotees when they attain the Brahmajnana. Then they are not in a position to describe what they have experienced at all. According to one school of thought, sages like Shukadeva saw and touched the ocean of Brahman, but did not plunge into it. Even the sages like Shukadeva, they only went till the periphery of the ocean. They could not jump. Had they jumped, they would not have been in a position to recite all those hymns and stotras. They just touched the start portion of the ocean and just came back. They didn't go inside the ocean at all, Sri Ramakrishna says. They just touched the ocean of Brahman and they came back. They came back and therefore they could tell something about Brahman. They could compose all those hymns, they could compose the scriptures, they could compose those treatises. Had they gone into the ocean of Brahman, they would not have been in a position to utter a single word. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says. And Sri Ramakrishna tells the preacher about his meeting with Vidyasagar and how Sri Ramakrishna explained the same things to Sri Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Once I said to Vidyasagar, everything else but Brahman has been polluted as it were, like food touched by the tongue, the uchishta. The moment we touch food with our tongue, it becomes spoiled. It is touched with the tongue, it cannot be given to any other person then. Only the Brahman is not spoiled by touch, Sri Ramakrishna says. Only the Brahman has not been described by words. In other words, no one has been able to describe what Brahman is. That is the only purest of the pure entity. It is not the uchishta. What food we eat, what the songs and the chanting we do, it is all sort of uchishta. But what Brahman is cannot be described. It cannot be put to words at all. It cannot be, the limitless cannot be put in any limits. A thing once uttered by the tongue becomes polluted. Like the food that we eat with tongue, it becomes uchishta. We cannot give it to anybody else then. So, anything which is uttered by tongue, it is uchishta. But Brahman remains the purity at its own pinnacle. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, even Vidyasagar, the great Pandit, though he was a great Pandit, great scholar. And then Sri Ramakrishna says, Vidyasagar, great Pandit though he was highly pleased with my remarks. Vidyasagar was highly impressed with Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. And imagine the person of the stature of Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the great scholar. He also appreciated these words of Sri Ramakrishna when Sri Ramakrishna had met him. And that is how Sri Ramakrishna again told the preacher that whether you are worshipping the formless, don't deny the form aspect of the God. You continue with your formless aspect, because the formless has assumed form for the sake of devotee, like the example of ice and water that Sri Ramakrishna has given in the initial teachings here. Om Namah Shri Bhagavate Ramakrishnaya. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. Jai Thakur, Jai Mah, Jai Swamiji.